even more so in this one to just 89 yards, forced 2 turnovers. Now, some of that probably was affected by the fact that the Bills jumped out to a 20-0 lead, scored 4 touchdowns in the first half, and held the Patriots to just 3 points in the first half. New England really never had a chance. And when you get that far behind that quickly, you start to press, you start to need to throw the ball more, and that probably affected New England's ability to compete in that game. Sunday was a 3-game slate, started with an absolute snoozer. Tampa was largely favored over the Eagles, who barely a playoff team this year. To be fair, the final score was a lot closer than expected. This was always a mismatch, and Philly's 15 points didn't come until the late stages of the fourth quarter. Eagles were dominated the entire time. I found myself, while I was watching the game, asking some of my friends, does Philly score in this game at all? They usually need that running game to help out their offense and be effective, and it was not successful this time. Tampa, who has one of the best run defenses in the league, held them to just 95 yards. And even with all the injuries that Tampa's dealing with, Mike Evans and Gronk were still on the field with Tom Brady, which probably would have been enough to win against the Eagles anyway. And with their injured running backs, Keyshawn Vaughn and Gio Bernard were relied on, and they weren't great, but they played well enough to contribute and make an impact on the game. The most interesting game on Sunday ended up being the Cowboys and 49ers. The 49ers won 23-17. Many thought San Francisco had a chance, but a lot of them, including myself, were skeptical if Jimmy G could play, Jimmy Garoppolo, could play well enough for San Francisco to actually pull off the upset. He had a lot of help. Elijah Mitchell almost got 100 yards rushing on the ground. Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, the receivers, came up with some big plays. The defense held Dallas to just 17 points. And there are really 2 big plays that come to mind impacting the outcome of this game. The first was a Dallas play. They had the ball early in the third quarter, trailing 16-7. Touchdown makes it 16-14, and the field goal at least makes it 16-10, and it's a one-possession game. Defense was coming off a big stop, so the offense needed to capitalize here. Like I said, score, touchdown makes it a 2-point game, field goal makes it a 6-point game. Instead, they ended up with a Dak Prescott interception. From what I remember, the throw was wide, but I didn't go back and watch the play at all, so I believe it was a wide throw for Cedric Wilson, and San Francisco intercepted the ball and scored on the next play and went up 23-7. That ended up being enough, and it was really a costly play for Dallas, especially since they cut the lead to just 6 in the final minutes, but it's not talked about as much because of what happened when they had the ball and a chance to go win the game. It was the final drive, obviously. 2nd and 1 from the San Francisco 41 with 14 seconds left. No timeouts. So, get tackled inbounds. You got to get up and spike the ball. And the Cowboys called a quarterback draw out of a timeout with no timeouts. Dak Prescott did get the first down, but this is the NFL. The clock does not stop on a first down. They didn't have any timeouts, and they ended up not able to clock the ball, spike the ball in time to save themselves for another play. And that was the end of the game. Inexplicable play call, very odd decision, very rushed, lack of execution in terms of clock management. A lot of fuss has been made about those final plays. I will say it wasn't a bad play design overall, but for the moment, that's just a downright terrible call. You have no timeouts. There's only 14 seconds on the clock. You need 41 yards. You don't need to get all 41 yards in one play, obviously, but you need to run something that's going to get you out of bounds and stop the clock, or get you an easy situation to spike the ball and stop the clock and give you one more shot at picking up the rest of it. Obviously, we saw the result of that play. It's not a play that helps it. Second of all, there's been a lot of complaining from the Dallas end that the refs wouldn't let them get the snap off. You go look at the video, and again, I didn't rewatch it, but I saw this when they were talking about it during the game. You can see the center struggling with the ball and the ref trying to place it, and the center's not letting anybody touch the ball. But it's league rules that the ball has to be spotted by an official. You can't just have the center come up and randomly put it down and snap it. It's got to be made for play. And as I said, you can clearly see the center keeping anyone from touching the ball. And at that point, he's really got to be familiar with the rules and aware of the situation. But I'm not going to blame the center. I'm not going to blame the refs. It's an overall bad call, bad time management, bad clock management from the Cowboys and their offense. The Sunday night game was also a bit of a snoozer. We saw the Steelers get pummeled by Kansas City just about 3 weeks before that. And it was pretty much the same exact teams in the same exact situation. I will give Pittsburgh credit that they kept it close early, but in the final 5:40-ish of the second quarter of the first half, Kansas City put up 21 points in that time span, took a huge lead, and ended up with a 42-21 win, with the Steelers getting a couple late scores to make that sound closer than it really was. And it's an unfortunate way for Ben Roethlisberger to go out. You know, you didn't think the Steelers were going to win this game at all, but you would have liked to have seen them make it close and try to make a run for Ben, as he expected to end his career. He's been in the league 18 years. And again, that's just an unfortunate way to see his career end. This year, the Super Wildcard weekend had a new wrinkle. There was a Monday night playoff game on ESPN and ABC. It was a matchup between the 4 and 5 seed in the NFC, which were NFC West division rivals. Arizona Cardinals were the 5, Los Angeles Rams were the 4, and so that meant the game was played at SoFi in Los Angeles. Going into the game, much was made about the Cardinals' late season collapse. Yet again, they started 10-2, finished 11-6. So they lost 4 of their last 5 games. And it's kind of been a bit of a trend in the Cliff Kingsbury era. There was also a lot being made about how Matthew Stafford had never won a playoff game in his previous 3 appearances. Although, as a Lions fan, I will tell you, he should have won that Dallas game, and his other losses were not his fault. The first time it was their first time in the playoffs since the 90s, and 2 years removed from being 0-16. And the last time in 2016, they really didn't belong in the playoffs. They weren't that deep of a team. But he'd been struggling in recent games. I believe he threw 8 picks over the last 3 games going into this one. And, you know, there were questions over whether he could propel them to a win, and he did exactly that. They got out to a 14-0 lead. His numbers weren't huge, but he was getting a lot of completions, especially to Cooper Kupp, surprise, against the Arizona defense. Defense wasn't allowing anything to Arizona's offense. Arizona got a big play from A.J. Green, and Sean McVay turned around and challenged it, and it ended up being overruled to an incomplete pass, and that kept the Cardinals pinned back near their goal line. Kyler Murray in the back of the end zone, he got a lot of pressure on him, and he ended up flipping this little underhand forward pitch that I don't know what he was thinking, how he thought that was going to get completed. But David Long, the corner for the Rams, came up, picked it off, and just walked right into the end zone. It was boom, 21-0 LA right there. Hard, very difficult deficit to come back from on that one. And, you know, at that point, the Cardinals basically being run out of the building, playing from behind. They do have an offense that kind of built to come back, but it just wasn't working in this one. The Rams had everything working for them. Nice home game. Kept Arizona off the board for much of the game. Arizona got a touchdown in the third quarter, field goal in the fourth, but that was about it. 34-11 Rams. So with those results, the Cowboys, Eagles, Patriots, Steelers, Raiders, and Cardinals are now out of the playoffs. This week in the divisional round, you'll see the Green Bay Packers and the Tennessee Titans, the 1 seeds in their respective conferences, return to the field. The Titans will get the first game of the weekend at 4:30 Eastern on Saturday against the Bengals, as the Bengals are the lowest seed in the AFC to advance. And that will be followed by San Francisco visiting Green Bay at 8:15, as San Francisco was the lowest NFC team to advance. On Sunday, you'll have to wait a little bit for the games to start. You know, we usually see 1 o'clock Eastern as the starting time for NFL games, but this week, the first Sunday game is going to be on NBC, and the second one will be on CBS, and the first one will start at 3 o'clock Eastern. It's the Rams and the Bucks. That's a rematch of a Week 4 game, I believe it was, where the Rams beat the Bucks. And then at 6:30 Eastern, you will be able to see the Bills and Chiefs play on CBS. CBS will also have that Titans and Bengals game, while Fox will have the San Francisco and Green Bay game. Also, the Titans are poised to get Derrick Henry back this week after he passed some contact tests during practice. Obviously, best running back in the NFL. I mean, dude's 6'3", 6'4", 250 pounds. And he's hard enough to bring down. He's about as athletic as anybody can be at that size with that speed. It's an unfair advantage almost. But Tennessee needs that because their offense is not built to sustain long periods without him. Yeah, they did win their division somehow and get the number 1 seed with him missing for months. But at the same time, they've had to rely a lot more on Ryan Tannehill, and he's shown that he can be turnover prone when he's asked to play that role. And they've also had some fumbles from the running backs that have been in there, so they need Derrick Henry to be able to unleash their true offense on the rest of the league throughout the playoffs. Moving to the MLB lockout news, I wish I had some better news, but it's dragging on, man. The league finally made a proposal to the players, but the proposal was not great and did not address a lot of the things that the players wanted addressed and was met with a lot of concern from the players. Didn't address key issues. There were concerns that popped up over competitiveness of bad teams and incentives of losing throughout the league. Current policies that incentivized losing and being a bad team, basically tanking kind of stuff. So not much progress being made still. We're going to have to wait out for a while. Meanwhile, 2 more veteran MLB players have retired. Veteran pitcher John Lester called it a career after 16 years with the Red Sox, the Cubs, Oakland A's, Washington Nationals, and St. Louis Cardinals. In 2007, he returned with the Boston Red Sox after a lymphoma diagnosis and helped them win the World Series. Lester has gotten some flack for his lack of skills as a batter. He has a notoriously low batting average, and that especially came out when he was playing with the Cubs for those years, and finally got that World Series with them. And sometimes he's known to struggle throwing the ball over to first base. But overall, fantastic player, 5-time All-Star, 3-time World Champion. He won an NL MVP. He's thrown a no-hitter. He has 200 career wins at 200 and 117, his overall record. 3.66 career ERA. The very least, he's on the fringe of the Hall of Fame. It's certainly a debate. We'll have to see if he gets in when he's eligible or if he has to wait. That process can kind of take a long time. Voting changes from year to year, depending who's on the ballot. You need a certain percentage to get in, so we'll have to see how long that takes. It's taken some notable players a long time to get in, so we'll see what happens. Also, veteran outfielder Travis Snyder has called it a career. He played 8 years with Toronto, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore, and also had several minor league deals with some of the teams over the past couple years. He was a 14th overall draft pick at one point, but he never really lived up to that as an MLB player, and was really just a serviceable bench player. But an 8-year career is a notable career, and you have to be a pretty good player just to carve that out. Jump over to college basketball. One team that's really been impressing me lately is the Texas Tech basketball team. They lost their head coach, Chris Beard, to Texas in the offseason, promoted assistant Mark Adams, and you weren't really sure if he could continue that. It could easily have been a rough season, but now the team is up to 13-4 was the last I saw. They lost to Providence. It's not necessarily a bad loss, but it's not a good loss. Gonzaga and Iowa State. Gonzaga, obviously, legitimate loss. Iowa State, surprisingly, hovering around the top 10, so a pretty decent loss expected there. And then Kansas State, not a great... I haven't seen a lot of Kansas State this year, but on paper, that's not a great loss either. They do have some really good wins. They beat a ranked Tennessee team, a number 1 Baylor team, a top 10 Kansas team, and the Baylor-Kansas wins were back-to-back, by the way, and they also won one of those games against Iowa State. They've already played their 2 against Iowa State and split those. So that's at least 4 quality wins and only 2 somewhat bad losses, and they're up to number 18 in the country and could keep rising if they keep this hot streak going. Notable results